All right, so hi everyone and welcome to the second session. This is session 2, Bumblebee Recording and Bee Walk. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Tom, can you see that okay? Yeah. Well, cool. Okay, so yeah, me and Tom with you this evening, which is nice. I will say this is my last ever online course for Skills for Bees Cymru before I leave to go to my new job with Pembrokeshire Coast National Park. So I feel a bit sad tonight actually, because I've done an awful lot of these and it's been very effective. I'm doing a mix of online and face-to-face learning. But there will be a new project officer post very, very soon. So you will be taken on the rest of your journey very ably, I'm sure. Okay, so tonight is all about recording and monitoring bumblebees. So why do we need to do this? Well, as I'm sure all of you are aware, over the last sort of century, really over the last 60 or 70 years or so, since the end of the Second World War, much of our wildlife has been in decline due to changes in how we manage our land. And bumblebees are absolutely no exception. So over a third of our social bumblebees have declined by more than 70% between 1900 and 1980. And if you remember, we have 18 social bumblebee species and 6 cuckoo species. What happened in 1980 is that there was the first real sort of quantitative study bringing together ad hoc recording records from the previous 80 years that was done and was able to show that there had been a significant decline in many of our species. 2 species are known to have gone extinct in the UK in the 20th century of bumblebee. The pattern in Wales is very similar, and in Wales we have 5 species of conservation concern, which I mentioned last week: the shrill cardabee, the brown-banded cardabee, the moss cardabee, the red-shank cardabee and the ruderal bumblebee. They're the kind of on the official list, if you like, of being of conservation concern. The broken belted bumblebee and the bilberry bumblebee are also scarce, particularly the broken belted bumblebee. But bilberry is a little bit easier to find if you're in the right habitat. And if we look at Wales as a geographical area, we also lost the great yellow bumblebee in the 20th century, which now only occurs in Scotland. So monitoring is really important to show these patterns, and without people making records of the bumblebees that they see, we wouldn't have this sort of quite impactful information. So a little bit more, very just brushing the surface, but important to know why these declines have happened. And there is a complex sort of group of factors, you know, things like chemicals, disease, etc. But really, research has shown that up until now that the biggest driving factor in decline is loss of habitat. So basically, after the Second World War, there was huge pressures on farmers to feed the nation really cheaply, and we moved from small family farms with lots of hedgerows and hay meadows, such as the one in the picture, which were species rich, very diverse, lovely overgrown hedgerows, cloverleys, you know, non-intensive farming basically provided lots and lots of habitat for all of our wildlife, not just bumblebees. But this was changed to you know, silage and monocultures, and basically hedgerows were taken out. That doesn't really happen so much now, but this is mid Pembrokeshire where I live, and basically all the fields around me look like this, and they are pretty much silent. They're devoid of birds, and they're devoid of the hum of insects as well. So it's been quite catastrophic, really, due to the pressure for cheap food. Of course, now we're also going into extremes of climate, so that factor will become increasingly important in changing populations. So should we be worried? Well, I know that I don't need to convince you of that, because that's why you're here, and you already have a real interest. But basically, obviously, all our wildlife has an intrinsic value. But the thing is with bees, and bumblebees in particular, is that they are incredibly effective pollinators. So rather than just the conservation-y people being worried about it, this means that governments and academic institutions have sat up and taken note of the decline in our pollinating species, not just bumblebees. And I'm sorry these figures are a little bit old, actually, but it just gives us an indication that back 10 years ago, insect pollination was important for 3/4 of our food crops, and estimated to be worth about £603 million. I mean, you can multiply that up accordingly for the time scale, and also geographically, obviously. Billions worldwide, and across the EU as well. So these little critters are economically important, but also nutritionally so, because they pollinate all the stuff that gives us loads of vitamins. So really, really, really important in underpinning our human food chain as well as the natural food chains. And on that note, 90% of our wild and garden flowering plants depend on insects for pollination. And Tom obviously works for Buglife, and so he'll be the first to tell you it's not just bumblebees, you know, beetles, moths, butterflies, hoverflies, solitary bees, honeybees, they're all pollinators, but bumblebees are super, super effective pollinators for several different reasons. The species group as a whole has a very diverse range in tongue length, so that they can pollinate lots of different crops very effectively, including the deep flowers like peas and beans. They're also adept at buzz pollination, which some of our plants, such as tomatoes, are totally dependent on, where they actually vibrate their wing muscles to release the pollen from the anthers. So yeah, they're pretty cool, really. And yeah, with their decline, it has wide-ranging impacts. So going back to my original point about conserving, monitoring and recording bumblebees, the Bumblebee Conservation Trust has a conservation team which provides lots of land management advice to landowners and farmers. It has an engagement team which works with schools and families and the wider public. But Skills for Bees is part of the science team. And our job is to get more data to underpin the other work that we do. And we desperately need more rigorous, standardised data. In the past, right back to the sort of the late 1800s, naturalists like Charles Darwin, for example, would go out and record the animals and plants that they saw. It was by and large men, not completely, but by and large it was men. And that sort of method of gaining data across the countryside really carried on, I would say, almost till about when I came into conservation about 20 or 30 years ago, before Tom's time. It was a pastime that was dominated by, you know, generally male recorders who had a lot of time on their hands and became very expert in their field. I would say in the last 20 years, there's been a radical transformation of how we record species, with the growth of social media, it's not stayed a pastime just for a kind of an elite group. It's become much more inclusive. There's loads of amazing young and older women who have just really got into wildlife recording and become brilliant experts, which has been lovely to see. And basically now it's much more inclusive and anyone can have a go. And social media and Zoom and all of these things have meant that more volunteers can develop the skills that are required. Because identification isn't just about, having an app like iNaturalist and shoving a picture in and getting a slightly dubious response. It is about developing quite detailed skills, and we can do that now, and that's what we're doing at the moment. Also, during that 20 to 30 year period, citizen science has become an absolute thing. Again, it's all about engaging more people in monitoring and recording and collecting data, crowdsourcing, if you like. There are lots of citizen science schemes out there. Some are better than others. And I have to say, Bee Walk is really good. Bee Walk is very, very well designed. It's scientifically sound, and the data, as a consequence, the data that is collected and the way it's analysed is very, very rigorous. So you're contributing to a really positive thing. So if we go back a little step now, recording bumblebees and submitting data. So that question there, how do you turn your sightings into biological records? And a biological record is a very specific thing. So I'm using terms like monitoring and recording, but a biological record is basically a piece of data that has 4 key parts. So it has, we call it the who, what, where, and when. So who recorded it? That's the recorder. That would be you if you're out recording bumblebees. What you recorded. So that's the species name, and that's where your identification skills come in. The where. So you give a location. Traditionally, it's a grid reference, but it doesn't have to be. It can be an address or a postcode or similar. And when, the date. Okay, so that is a biological record, and to make that, you need the 4 bits of information. Now, there are 2 broad ways of collecting biological records. So firstly, there's unstructured recording, or as I like to call it, just ad hoc recording. And that's where you might be out for a walk. For example, I've just been out and I've seen an early purple orchid on the roadside by my house. So I could submit that as one piece of data. And we're going to go into how we do that in a minute, into iRecord or your local environmental record centre. Okay, so that's unstructured recording. Anyone can do it. You record what you like and you just record sort of individual records. And that gives us, don't worry too much, I'll go into this a bit more later, points on a map. So that gives us distribution data. So for me, I live down in sort of mid Pembrokeshire. If I submit my orchid record, we'll have a spot with a photograph, ideally. We'll have a point on the map for the rest of time that there was an early purple orchid at that site on that day, recorded by that person. Some of you might already be doing this. Okay, so that's unstructured recording. And then structured or standardised recording is part of a scientifically designed scheme, such as Bee Walk. So that's where you've got a crowd of volunteers all collecting data in the same way. And this can provide distribution data, but it can also provide abundance data, i.e. how numbers are changing for a species over time. So scientifically and in terms of conservation, structured recording is much more useful. They both have a value. And we'll look at some of these graphs later, but basically you can begin to look at trends in populations. And of course, with climate change and habitat loss and everything else, that is really important, both at a local scale at a particular site, but also nationally and globally. So we'll start with going into a bit of detail on unstructured recording. In Wales, we have 4 local environmental record centres, and for you guys, I'm guessing you're all in the Neath Port Talbot area, as this is a Beelines session. So your local environmental record centre is Subrec, the South East Wales Biodiversity Record Centre. So that covers that area, that orange area there at the bottom. All 4 record centres work together to hold all the biodiversity data for Wales, but Subrec is your go-to one. And basically, they are responsible for holding biodiversity data, liaising with the kind of national databases, and for supporting people to become recorders. So there are 4 ways that you can submit a record or a group of records into Subrec, your local environmental record centre. This is actually the page from Cofnod, the North Wales one, but they're all very similar. So you can register on the Subrec website, and you can submit records straight into their online recording system. So that's easy peasy. If you enjoy using apps, you can download the Lurk Wales app, which is free and it's really, really nice. That's the logo on the App Store, and it's quite easy to use. There are lots of tutorials on YouTube if you want to have a look at that, or you can contact Subrec, but it's very intuitive. The third way is a little bit old-fashioned now. Every local environmental record centre has a list of local experts in each particular group, species group. I don't think Subrec have actually got I don't know whether they've got a bumblebee recorder, or if there's one for Neath Port Talbot, but anyway, it doesn't matter. That's a way that people used to send their records to the county recorders, but that doesn't really happen anymore with all the online stuff. Or another bit of an old-fashioned way now, you can email the records in a spreadsheet, in an Excel spreadsheet, which they provide online, or you can even post them in on a bit of paper. And when I worked for my local environmental record centre about 20 years ago, loads of records came in on paper, just on lists, and we had to put them all into the database. I doubt that happens very much now. So just a little bit more. There's the Lurk Wales app. Just a little image of it there. If you use iRecord, it's the same thing. All the data goes to the same place. It's just that the Lurk Wales app has a bilingual front on it. So it's the same software if you already use iRecord. That's the UK-wide version. Either is fine. Tom, I don't know if you could just Google the YouTube Lurk Wales app video and put that into the chat. I don't think. Yeah, I can't see the chat while I'm in display mode. If you can find it, that might be useful for people. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. But anyway, yeah, so if you are submitting individual ad hoc records, try and submit a photo, even if it's not a brilliant photo. Try, because it'll give the verifiers, the people who are, you know, the experts that are looking at the data coming in and verifying the records as correct or not correct, it'll give them a fighting chance, especially as a new recorder. So if it's bumblebees, think about trying to get down to their level, you know, while they're foraging, side-on shots, face, etc. All of those things are really important. So yeah, and you can submit records of anything, you know, fox, orchid, robin, uh, snakes, lizards, whatever it is, you can submit those. I'm just going to take a little drink a minute. Okay, so that's a quick intro to ad hoc recording. So we're going to go straight into Bee Walk now, which is obviously structured recording, standardized. So Bee Walk is the citizen science scheme of the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. It's one of very few UK-wide standardised schemes, so it's really important, and it collects really really good data, which feeds into all sorts of things like the State of Nature report, Office for National Statistics, all sorts, lots of academic papers and things like that. So really good stuff. The aims of Bee Walk are to gather both abundance and distribution data for the UK's bumblebee species, to analyse the data and report trends in bumblebee populations over time, and that's done by Richard Commont, the science manager of the trust, and to investigate the causes of changing trends in bumblebees, for example, climate or habitat change. So those are the overarching. The key points of the method, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more, are that volunteers walk a monthly transect once a month from March to October, which is bumblebee season. Even if you think you're not going to see any bumblebees, try and do a walk every month. The transect needs to be between 1 and 2 kilometres long. And bumblebees are both identified and counted along the different sections of the transect. So you split your transect into sections, ideally according to habitat. So I'll come to that in a bit in more detail. And then at the end of the season, or indeed after each walk, you submit your data not into your local record centre, but straight into Bumblebee Conservation Trust via the dedicated Bee Walk website, which is separate from our main website. So there you have www.beewalk.org.uk. So that's we're gonna look at that in a sec. And the software in that is hosted by the Biological Records Centre of the UK. So, okay, going into the process a little bit now. So setting up your Bee Walk, we ask you to plan a route which is safe and accessible, obviously, taking in ideally different habitats along, for example, along the paths of a local nature reserve or park, through a village. One of my Bee Walks starts in my garden, so it doesn't have to be like an amazing triple SI. It could be a country park, it could go along the road verge. So you know, we need information from all different types of settings and habitats. As I've already said, the route should be between 1 and 2 kilometres and should take about 60 minutes to walk at a slow to steady-ish pace. Once you're sort of confident in your BID, you should be able to walk your Bee Walk without stopping too much. But when you're a beginner, obviously you need to stop a lot to ID the bees. And the route should be split into at least 3 distinct sections based on habitat. And before you map your route on the Bee Walk website, we ask that you make a dedicated visit to recce it and walk it beforehand, so you understand the section, what the sections could be, you know, where they begin, where they end, etc. Okay, so if you've decided that you're going to do a Bee Walk, and you could do a Bee Walk as an individual, you could do it as a group. Tom and I set up a bee walk at the Road to Nature up in Neath Port a couple of weeks ago, and that's going to be a group bee walk. There's like a couple of key people that are leading on it, but there's other volunteers coming in and taking part, which is quite a nice way to do it actually. But what you need to do is register as a bee walker and also create an account on the Bee Walk website. So there's 2 steps. So 2-step process. The first step is to complete the Google form. And what I'm going to do now, I didn't used to do this, but I've done it the last few times. I'm going to come out of the PowerPoint and I'm actually going to go into the Bee Walk website and show you this. Almost inevitably something goes wrong when I do this, but yeah, so this is the Bee Walk website. I'm actually logged in at the moment. So if I log out, let's log out. So that's what you would be faced with when you go to beewalk.org.uk. So first of all, you're going to register with us as a bee walker, which means that you become part of the Bee Walk family, and our Bee Walk officer Helen will know that you exist, and you will get all access to newsletters and help and all of that sort of stuff. So you register here on that link, and it takes you to this really quite straightforward Google form, which is quite nice and simple. So you put all your information. We need your information. You have to be fully registered, but it's all held under GDPR guidelines, so it's all safe. And when you get to the bottom of the sheet, you're directed then to a little ID test when you hit next, but use your resources, use your ID sheets, don't worry too much about it. It's just so that we know you're not a complete beginner, but it doesn't matter if you get some wrong. So that's your registration. So I'll go back. So then what you've got to do once you're registered is you need to create an account, and this will be the box on the right. Obviously, I already have an account, but if you don't, you go to the bottom here on create new accounts, and it's the usual thing. You need a username and a password. And Helen will, when you've done that, you'll get an activation email off Helen to just activate that account and make it live. So I'll log in robot question. So once you're logged in, the site looks like this, and you get this Bee Walk map. Before we go into some of the tabs, this map, I think it's a bit out of date. It hasn't got all our Welsh bee walks on yet, but it's a bee walk heat map. So it shows where there are records, bee walk records. So because I've been working with Emily, this is the 3rd year now, we have got a few bee walks going on, but you can see there's a bit of a gap. Then, like I said, this is probably a little bit out of date, but there's a bit of a gap around Port Talbot, which is really important habitat, because we've got some really, really rare species here. So yeah, it'd be good to get a few more bee walks set up in the Neath Port Talbot area. So the website, I'm going to just direct you to actually, yeah, I'll just show you the resources page just to start with. So this is a good first point, and it has tons of information on there. So the quick start guide is really useful. The monthly recording form I'll come to in a bit. There's a photography guide, bee walk guidance videos, and then underneath we have lots of information from Richard and I on YouTube, ID guides. Oh, there's loads of stuff there. It's quite good actually. So I would definitely recommend that as a useful starting point. So I'll go back to the presentation. Sorry, it is a little bit disjointed, but I think showing you the site is really useful because it isn't an easy site, and we've had people kind of fall at that hurdle in the past. So I quite like to go through it with you. So there we are. I've already said that. So register, then create your account. And then it's time to, you've already recce'd your site. So then it's time to set up your bee walk on the site. So we'll go back. So if we go to the My Sites tab, second one in, it's quite slow. I'm warning you now. This software it's quite complicated. Like I said, it's hosted by the Biological Record Centre, and it is quite slow. So as you can see, I've got lots of bee walks against my name. A lot of them are test bee walks. So to add a new bee walk, presumably this will be your first one, you go to the little blue button at the bottom and you say add site. Richard's going to kill me for adding another one. They all need to be deleted. And could I ask one of you to give me a postcode in Neath Port Talbot area? It may or may not be an ideal postcode for a bee walk, but if someone could just yell out a postcode, that would be really good. Or put one in the chat for Tom to yell out, and we'll try and demonstrate setting one up. Anyone brave enough?
I've just put one in the chat, but it's SA129YW.
SA129. What have you got a name for that?
Twyn. Is
Twyn?
Yes, that's it. Yes.
Okay, let's see what that throws up then. Oh, sorry, I should have. Right, so let's zoom in. Oh, look at how interesting. It's so many good things around this area. Oh, this looks wonderful. So I'm going to go in. Right. Is that your house?
It's my parents.
It's your parents, surrounded by what looks like amazing habitat. All very interesting. So what I'm going to do, we're going to make that, I'm going to click on that square. Okay. And straight away, so that's going to be the beginning of our bee walk from your parents' house. And you can see over here, it's automatically put in the grid reference. Okay, the 6-figure grid reference. You don't have to worry about that. So as long as you know where you are on the map and you know where your bee walk is starting, then it's done. So we'll call it Test Carmarthen Bee Walk. Okay, for want of a better name. So county, is it, what's the county there?
It is Neath Port Talbot. It was West Glamorgan was the old county. Yeah.
So it might still be under Glamorgan, mightn't it? Let's have a look. Yeah, so there it is. We're old school here on the Bee Walk website. Number of sections, well, we're going to say 3 for want of argument, okay, because if we're making it up as we go along. Overall length, we don't know yet. Don't have to worry about that because the machine will do that automatically. Year established 2023, and then I'm going to save it. Okay, slow and steady Bee Walk website. And then it takes you. So we've done, if you look at these 3 tabs above the yellow box, we've got site details on the left. Then we've got route, and we're on route now. It's taken me. Oh, that's a new little box there. That's nice. Okay, it being improved all the time. So the root, that's a bit annoying because it's not actually, when I've done this before, it's taken me straight to the bee walk. So that's a bit frustrating. I don't know, there's always some little thing that can be a bit frustrating, but my colleague Helen, I won't be able to find this now. My colleague Helen will be on hand. Yeah, I've got no idea where it is. So I'm gonna skip this section, but basically that's the right area, isn't it? Is it up there? Oh, there it is. Look. Oh, look, it has come up. It's never done that before. It's always just zoomed right in. So that's good. It's there on that little red square. So that's a learning point for me. Yeah, the website is not my forte, folks. This is Helen's realm, so I'll make excuses for myself. But yeah, so basically, what you do with this, this is the bit I have found tricky in the past. It's basically you're just drawing on your sections. So you will have recce'd your walk, you'll know your sections. So it's come up as 3 sections because that's what we put in the site details. And section 1 here, that is highlighted in green. So we're on section 1 and you can see the cursor has a red circle. So basically we're going to start in that garden. So I'm making this up. You click on the map and then you just drag the mouse and it creates a line. And I'm going to say that section 1 is going down the road. To move the map, you just hold the mouse button down and move it as you normally would. So I'm going to say we're going to go down the road, down to here, and that's section 1, okay? And then I'm going to double click and it turns yellow. So we finished section 1. And I'm going to click now on section 2 and I'm going to start it there. I have no idea whether we would be able to do this, obviously, but I'm just making it up as we go along. And I'm going to say section 2. Imagine this is going over perhaps grassland and meadows. Obviously, I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. I'm going to move the map again. And then if you want to turn a corner, you just click once and then you can turn it like that. We'll go up here, move the map again. Up to there. Imagine that was through grassland. And then I'm going to double click twice, say section 2's finished. And I'm going to go to section 3. And we'll imagine this is a nice bit of woodland. Let's move the map again. And I'm going to go back down to the house for a cup of tea. Done. Okay, so that's our 3 sections done. And then what you need to do when you've done that, what I'm going to do first, actually, I'm going to go back to site details. And you'll see that the overall length of the transect has now been inserted because it's worked it out from the map. And that's perfect because it's 1,580 metres, which is 1.5k, absolutely perfect. So that's good. So we've done the route. So now we're going to go to section details. It always does this. For some reason, it's missing a section there. Let's make sure. Yeah, sorry, folks. I don't know why it's not save section 2. This is the little blips where Helen will be on hand to help. So I'm gonna whiz over that now and not dwell on it. But there's, yeah, some reason section 2 hasn't saved there. But basically what you need to do, the final bit of the jigsaw, is for each section, you need to record the habitat and the land use. Now, you only ever have to do all of this once. Once it's set up on the website, that's it. You don't have to do it every time, okay? Because this is a little bit of a faff. But what they do, what it does when you, so for if we go to section 1, principal habitat. Now these habitat descriptors, let's go down a bit, these habitat descriptors can be a little bit off-putting. They're taken from sort of an ecological viewpoint. So the first few are coastal, and we've got fresh water. Then we go into grasslands, different types of grassland. Okay, and things like bracken-dominated glades and scrub, etc., etc. Then it goes into woodland, small man-made woodland, etc. And then it's really at the end that you've got the more man-made sort of habitats. So really, that first section was roadside and gardens. So the best fit is 39 ornamental shrubs, trees, lawns of churches, parks, domestic gardens. So that would be your principal habitat. It could be that along that bit there is a little pocket of woodland, a small man-made, you know, some planted trees. So you might put a second habitat in there along your bee walk. But the first habitat is obviously the most important. And then primary land use is similar. The descriptors are quite formal. But for that first one, it would be probably outdoor amenity, or maybe transport tracks and ways actually for that one. So there is a little bit more detail for the man-made habitats and land use, I should say, there. And then at the end, it gives your section length. Okay, so it works that out automatically, and then you just hit save. Okay, so you do that for each section, and then it's done, and you never have to do it again. Okay, so we'll go back to the presentation. Okay, so that just reiterates what I've already said. So the site details tab, you put in the main descriptions of your new bee walk. Then you draw your section, your route section by section on that second tab. And then the final bit is putting in the section details. Okay. Once you've done that, Helen will send another email that your bee walk has been approved. And then you're good to just go out and do it, which is the fun bit, and actually count some bees and get out in the fresh air after all that computer stuff. So doing your bee walk, you'll use a monthly recording form, and that is downloadable from the resources tab that I showed you. If you haven't got a printer, what I suggest is that you look at the form on the website and just do the headings in your field notebook. Now I tend to do mine on the notes section of my phone, but for the first few years I did it, I always used the form, and it was really good training to do it correctly. The first part of the form is just your site details, so record a name. That's important if there's more than one of you doing the bee walk. Date, start and finish time, name of the site, also important if you've got more than one bee walk, the temperature, the wind speed, and relative amounts of sun and cloud. So that's all your kind of environmental factors. And then we go into the interesting bit, which is recording the species seen and counting them for each section. So, for example, if you've got 3 sections on your bee walk and you see a buff-tailed bumblebee, you will write buff-tailed bumblebee in there, section 1. if you can identify queen worker male, you will put QWM in that column, that third column. And then the easiest way is to do a tally. So you could have buff-tailed bumblebee, section 1, queen 3, you know, line, line, line. When you see another species or a different caste for section 1, you start a new line, and so on. And then when you cross into section 2, then you will start again. So buff-tailed bumblebee queen, section 2, okay? You can put the flower they're foraging on if you want to in this column. And I think you have to ask Helen about if you want to record foraging data and flowers. There's a kind of different section on the website that you need to get access to. So that is how you record your bumblebees when you're out in the field. If there's a little group of you, you know, I suggest clipboard, pencil, camera, etc. We'll do a little bit more on equipment in a minute. And then the final bit, you're back to your computer and you need to submit your data. So I'm going to just show you the website. Bear with me, folks, just once more for this bit. So to submit your data, you don't go to the data tab, surprisingly enough. That's to look at all your past records and other people's data. You go to My Walks and you will be presented with a calendar and a little list at the top. Because I've got lots of different bee walks that are active, then you need to select one. This Brunel Dock one, actually, I don't know if it's the Dan on this call, because I know it's Dan was on this call, but this is the one being walked by Dan, I think, at the Quays in Neath Port Talbot. I've only got access to this because I was given it for administration purposes. I've not had anything to do with this bee walk, but basically, so you pick your bee walk, which one is it, and then you get your calendar. So if you've done a bee walk today, you just click on the green little plus sign. There's the bee walk at the Quays by the council offices, which is really nice. And you would put in, I'm not actually going to enter anything, obviously, because that would mess it up. But so on the first tab, you put in your start time, say 2:30, end time 3:30. Was it sunny or cloudy? Well, we'll put sunny for today. Wind speed, oh, it was quite, I'm going to put 4 for today. Dust raised and small branches move. Temperature, we'll say 10 degrees. Then you go to the next bit, and that's where you actually add your data. So you'll be presented with this table, which grows as you put stuff in. It might be that you didn't see anything. So you don't put, you still register that walk, but you don't put anything in. So in the first column for species, when you start typing, it's got every bee species in Britain in here, including all the solitaries. So it'll throw up a load of stuff at you when you put buff-tail in. So you go down and there's the buff-tail bumblebee there. So you can click on that. Section 1, we'll say we saw 2 queens. And then we'll say red-tailed bumblebee there, Bombus lapidarius. And we'll say we saw a red-tailed bumblebee, but we didn't actually know what caste it was. So we'll put in that in there, 1. And that's all we saw in section 1. And it could be that in section 2 you didn't see anything, so you don't record anything. But let's say in section 3 we saw an early bumblebee. And we saw 4 workers, and so on. The next step is just to add any notes. So, for example, if you did your bumblebee transect and one of the sections was across a meadow and it had been cut in early July and all the flowers had gone, then you might want to make a note of that and the impact that it has on your bee walk. So any notes can go in there. Okay, I'm obviously not going to save that now because it would be false data. So we're almost there, folks. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop sharing for a sec and take a moment. There we are. And just see if there's any questions so far. Please feel free to shout out. There's nothing in the chat.
Got one just on the back of Keith's question. With the flower section, Claire, on that, if a bumblebee lands on, let's say, a leaf or a twig, do you count that, or is it just if it's visiting the flower itself?
No, it's got to be foraging.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, go on.
I've got a question. I did a bee walk today on the farm. We did one, the first one for this year.
Yeah.
And in terms of recording the species, the person that was leading had like a glass tube thing that you can catch or try and catch the bee so you can have a closer look at it. What is the recommended way of, using a better word, catching a bee safely so you can have a little bit of close-up look at?
That is a really good question, and I am going to show you something now. So, okay, so
because
on our
with the little glass thing that she had, it was we managed to capture one with it, but not, you could see the difficulty. So when you move towards it, it will fly away and stuff like that. So
yeah, bear with me a sec. Right, so how long is this video? Right, I won't show you the whole thing. So I'm going to go over resources in a minute, but I'm just going to share my screen again. On our Bumblebee Conservation Trust YouTube channel, can you see that, Tom?
yeah,
Have I done it correctly? So
yeah.
I made this video one Saturday morning. That isn't me. They've stuck that picture on there. So I'm going to just show you the beginning of this. It's only 6 minutes long. That's my garden.
Sound to it.
Yeah, no sound. That's, yeah, I don't think you can hear the sound probably, but basically this video tells you exactly that, Nico.
Okay.
So
yeah,
go and have a look at that. It's only 6 minutes long. The bees were very, very accommodating and behaved beautifully. So hopefully that will help you.
thank you very much.
Yeah. When you are beginning a bee walk, really you do need to be prepared to catch them, because otherwise you're gonna miss. You can enter a record for an unknown, an unidentified bumblebee. You can just put it in as bombus and that's fine, but really you do need to be prepared to catch them safely, not harm them in any way. They're quite tough, and you can release them. You release them back.
Yeah, the person that was leading this, she just looks at it, can identify it. She's really good, but obviously she wanted to show us.
Yeah.
A little bit, and that's why she was tempted to capture one or two. We had one queen, a buff-tailed bumblebee, and obviously for us as newcomers, like, it's a really fascinating thing to see things a little bit, you know, live up close.
Yeah, and you know, bumblebees are tough. You're not as long as you're careful in how you handle them, you're not going to do them any harm. They really are quite tough. So yeah, it is really important. So on that note, I will get back to the presentation and show you the equipment that you need. So, let's go zip past that. So, as I've already said, the resources are online, so have a look at that. The Bee Walk annual report is on our website on the Bee Walk tab on the main Bumblebee Conservation Trust website. And we have just published our 10-year report. So, Tom, if you could you pop a link to that, please? It's really easy. If you Google it, you'll find it. It's on our website on the Bee Walk page. That's really interesting. And Helen is on hand to help you. So beewalk@bumblebeeconservation.org. Just a little bit of background. Bee Walk has been going properly since sort of 2010. And that is the sort of bee walking numbers, if you like. So we've got well over 1,000 registered, but last year over 800 people walked their bee walks. Of course, some people register them and then never get round to it. So yeah, still really good numbers. 250,000 records submitted by the end of last year, and over 800,000 individual bees that have been recorded and counted. So yeah, you can see the COVID blip there in 2020 when not so many people could get out and do their walk, but it's going from strength to strength. Let me just have a look, because I wanted to just, yeah, okay. I'll go over the resources in a sec. So the sort of data that we can pull out of Bee Walk is exemplified here. So these two charts are both pertaining to the early bumblebee, Bombus pretorum, and the first one on the left is the yearly abundance between 2010 and 2020. So the red line is the average and the grey area is the standard deviation, if you like your stats around that average. And you can see that the bumblebee, the abundance has fluctuated over those years, with 2014 being a particularly good year for the species. I'm pretty sure that the last couple of years' data is not so good due to the very hot summers having a negative impact on them. And then the chart on the right is the abundance per month. So March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October along the bottom. And then the relative abundance is shown there. The blue line is 2020. And then the red line is the average between 2010 and 2019. So you can see that red average shows that June, month number 6, was the peak for this species over that 9 years. But in 2020, the peak was clearly May, so it's a month earlier. So take from that what you will, that the species seems to be peaking earlier now than it has over the last 10 years. Right, just a little nod to this scheme, the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme. This is another structured recording scheme run by the Pollinator Monitoring Scheme, but it is simpler and more accessible for people. So, for example, if you are working with children or a group of volunteers who aren't very confident with their ID skills, this is a really nice way of recording pollinators without having to learn to identify species. And basically a fit count is a flower insect timed count where you target a particular flower, which is all within the scheme. So, for example, ragwort is one of the target flowers, and you just record the insects visiting that flower patch within a 10-minute period. And there's a really nice app, which you can see. This is the logo for the app, this pink logo here, pink and black logo. And if you want a similar way, or if you like, you know, if your mobility isn't quite so good, this is something you can do in your garden without having to do a transect, which is more challenging. Okay, so just mentioning that. And then field kits. So going back to Nico's question, you know, catching the bees, you really do need a field bag. I just use this really pretty rubbishy little bag, which was an old first aid kit actually, but it's really handy because it's got lots of pockets and it goes over my shoulder, because, well, across my body, because if you try and use a rucksack with your pots and your, you know, all your bits and bobs in and your camera and everything, you just can't get to it. So a long strap bag is good. These basic butterfly nets are ideal for bumblebees. Don't let anyone tell you any different. They're perfectly good. They're nice and lightweight, but they're sturdy, and they're on Watkins and Doncaster. They're about £12–13, something like that. Hand lens, again, cheap and cheerful is fine. ×10 is perfect for bumblebees. I strongly recommend you put it on a lanyard around your neck. Nico, in your question about the pots, Watkins and Doncaster online do lots of different specimen pots. For bumblebees, ideally, I would go for the ones that are about 1.5 centimetres across, and try and get the very clear plastic so that you can take a photograph. I get rid of the lids and I use a plug of kitchen roll, because then you can gently immobilize the bee, not squash it, but immobilize it, because otherwise it's really hard to use the hand lens because it's just bumping round the tube. Yeah. These are queen marker cages, which some of my colleagues use.
Yeah, that's what we were using today.
Yeah, I don't get on with these at all personally. The bees' legs go through the netting, which I don't like, and I just can't get on with them. I always use a pot and a kitchen roll plug, and that works for me. But
the plunger doesn't fit snugly either in that, does it?
Yeah, the plungers come out really easily and then the bee flies off. So I just find it a real faff. But my boss, Richard, who's like a brilliant entomologist, he uses these. So it's got to be personal choice. And I think when I got into, I didn't get into recording and working with insects until I was 40. I was like much more a botanist before that. And I found it very intimidating because I worked with very good entomologists who said, you know, you should be using this sort of net and you should be doing it like this and you should be doing it like that. But I think everybody finds their own level and their own way of working. So be confident in what works for you. If you're not comfortable potting them, then really get used to taking as good of photographs as you can. But, you know, you do what works for you and what you're comfortable with in the field. As long as you're treating the bees with respect and you don't hurt them, then, you know, that's the most important thing. And then we've already been over this last week. So, you know, there's some good books out there. Definitely the one on the right, the New Pocket Guide, is a brilliant thing to have in your field bag. Actually, all my stuff's packed now because I've got a field day tomorrow. But all good stuff, all good books there, which we went over last week. And then again, reiterating, online and mobile resources are now very important as well. So there's Bumblebee Conservation Trust website has an ID section. Our app is really, really useful. It's called What's That Bumblebee? And it's got a little blue icon, really good for the common species, but doesn't have the rarer ones. If you're a Facebooker, then UK's Bees, Wasps and Ants has a brilliant Facebook page. I think some people do find it quite daunting because there's a lot of experts on there, but there's loads of people that are beginners as well, and you can get ID. It's because before you submit your record, you want to try and get your ID as confident as, you know, am I quite confident about this species, this particular one that I saw? So all these are for your ID. Stephen Falk's Flickr pages are amazing. Just Google it. He's got tons of pictures of every single species, so you can get lots and lots of comparisons. He does also put pictures of pin specimens, so if you don't want to see those, then don't go there. But it is an incredible resource. It's like having a museum collection at your fingertips, but there's lots of photographs as well of species in the field, so it's really good. And that is it for tonight. So for me,